Okay, I guess we'll start. We've had a several weeks break because Yom Tov and everything, but we'll go back. So the pasuk which we had begun, and then we went off into different discussions, which were fine, is Vayas alikim es harakia vayavdel ben amayim asher metachas harakia ben amayim asher mal harakia vayichein. That's Genesis 1:7. The translation general, God made the firmament and it separated between the water which is under the firmament and the water which is above the firmament, and it was so. So we translated it, and we started with that, is that with the way we translate it is, and it is set up by a power of boundaries in all its details, the expansive filter, and is distinguished within the current of the surge, this that is lower than the filter, and within the current of the surge, this that is a cover to the filter, and it becomes what is. And so we will discuss what the filter is and what the cover is, what's above and below. Now, very often people look at, when they try to understand the Torah and try to understand God, they look at it from a very external perspective. They look at it from themselves. The way they see themselves, that's how they see a being. They don't look at a being that's different from them, that maybe it doesn't have the body and shape and everything that they have. So they often interpret things based on the way they see it. And this is generally the issue, that people look externally rather than internally. And that's the way the Torah has generally been translated, in a very external form. But the words and meanings of Torah have a much deeper meaning that go far beyond the physical, that go within. And when a person is searching within themselves, within their heart, within their soul, that they can find in the Torah also the ways to go within their heart and soul and connect with God, with the Creator, from within. And then you realize that everything is inside you. It's in your mind, in your heart, and that's where the connection is. So instead of running all over the place to go to a place where God might be, you might find something somewhere. The place you have to go to is within yourself. The external is nice, but the internal is where it is. And so, similar in this verse as well, the meaning is much more than just the simple translation. Our body is mainly composed of water. And the water is a conduit for moving things through the body, and some becomes internalized in the body. The body needs the moisture, and some things go out of the body. Now, the water also conducts energy, electricity. There are vibrations that are conducted through water. So it's not just that we are water, but there's the elements that are conducted through water can conduct themselves through us. And we can pick up things and feel things because of whatever we have within us. All the elements in us block us from feeling things or picking up things as well. And in a certain sense, this rakia, this firmament between one level and another, is also internally in a person's body, things that at certain points in life you're open to something, and then you have different minerals or different metals or things that are toxify your body, and they block you from where you were before. And when you cleanse it, you open up to where you were before. So there's an opening, closing in the physical body, in your mind, in your heart, and in all parts of your being. That happens as well. So this, when it starts the pasuk Vayas, there are 3 verses here. The first one was where God was thinking about the idea Vayas, and He made, or it is, we translate it as set up, because all this is happening in the thought of the Creator. And since it's happening in thought, it doesn't happen in a physical sense that we know, but it becomes the composition. There's a thought, and then the composition in the mind, how it's set up in mind. Like before you plan something, you set everything up so you know how it will operate and what will happen. That setting up is what allows it to come forth. When you plan something, then you're able to implement it in a certain way. So that's vayas here. The action here is an action in thought. And Elokim, God, we translate as a power of boundaries. Here, it's the bound. Everything has a certain limit and description. In order to do something, to implement something, you need comprehension of it. So the Elokim here is a power of boundaries. The boundaries, but it's a boundary of comprehension. It means the power from the Creator of comprehension, understanding something. So you could say just the power of bina, of comprehension. Ace is often not translated or said, but often it's also meant in all its details, from Aleph to Taf, from A to Z. So with comprehension, in the thought of the Creator, everything is set up in all its details. So till this point in thought, there was just a general concept of something, but no details. Now you have the details. The filter, rakia, a firmament, we call a filter. There are different ways, as we'll say, of what it could be called actually, but we call it a filter because it's something that receives from one place and it lets out, it receives and lets out. And it filters whatever has to be filtered. And so there are different types of elements have to be filtered in different ways, in different places. So it's not just one filter or one firmament, one type of thing. It's just between two levels that need something to filter it. Vayavdel, and separated or distinguishes. It distinguishes any structure when you create something, that creation then now becomes something. Beforehand there was like nothing there. Once you make it, there is an entity there. So that's why Vayavdel, it's not a separation as much as what it achieves is it distinguishes something, it brings something out. So it's not to block, its intention is not to block, even though it does block out something, its intention is to bring something out, to distinguish something. Within, in the core of the formation of this existence, Hamayim, which they translate water, and we translate water as the current of the surge. There's a surge of energy, a flow of life. Water brings life. There's a current in that water, in that surge. And that surge, that current that's in the surge comes from wisdom of the creation that was put into this creation. So there's wisdom not of this creation, and there's wisdom of this creation. And that is the mayim, the water or the current of the surge. Asher, this, that, mitachas, is lower. This, that, what does it mean, asher? Asher is this that allows the transition to occur, is lower it has a lower resonance than the filter. So the filter is filtering something to something lower, from a higher place to a lower place, so to speak. It doesn't have to be. It can be from one spot to another. It can be on the same, but from one place to another. The word here, metachas, uses metachas, which generally is translated lower. We'll talk about more of that later, I hope. Then the filter that defines the variance. The filter also defines things. And within the core of formation of this existence, the current of the surge, Hamayim, that comes from the wisdom in creation. Asher, this that is, it allows a transition through. Asher Me'al, that which is a cover. Me'al can be above, but it can be a cover. It allows a transition through a strong resonance to the filter that defines the variance, and it becomes formed into what is something that can be called a reality, a new type of reality. So that basically is a translation of the verse. Now, to give you some references as to where these translations come from. The first one, Vayas, which we normally say Asiya is making, but we would translate set up. The idea of being set up comes from Purusha HaTorah L'Balei HaTosfos. There's a whole volume which was printed more recently. They collected from the Balei HaTosfos the different commentaries on Chumash, and they've collated together. And so there it uses the word Vayas as set up. Now the word Vayas and as set up has a few meanings. Like in Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, it says V'asasas tzirpaneha, make her nails, do them up. So there it's like putting on makeup. So it's v'asasa, you make yourself up. And what it could mean there, v'asas tzirpaneha, though, make her nails, it could mean let them grow or cut them. Whichever looks worse. It's about making the nails look worse. So whatever makes it look worse is what you do. So asasa there could be growing, could be cutting. It's about making them look in one way or another. But there it happens to be about making worse. And then in Ecclesiastes 4:17 it says there, they do not know to do bad. Einam yodim la'asos ra. They don't know to do bad. Now, there it could also mean fix. They don't know how to fix the bad. Or it means they only know how to do bad. So the word there can be doing or it could be fixing. So you could translate the word asiya as fixing. So it's what the operative action that's happening in that place. As we mentioned, the whole Torah is actually verbs, so that's why the translations vary by the words, because each place has its meaning and its application, and therefore one word in the Torah used in many places has different translations because they're verbs. Whatever the action is in that place is how you translate it.
What's the translation in Koheles? Fix or to do?
You could Einam yodim la'asos ra, which is, you translate simply, they don't know how to do bad. Okay?
Or maybe they don't know how to fix bad. They do bad, but they don't
They know how to fix it right.
So how do you know which way to go?
Well, then you look at the flow of the verses and you see what fits in. And sometimes one way will fit in and sometimes another. And since Torah has many different ways, so let's say you're going through something in your life, then you may learn from it that you have to fix the bad. And sometimes something else is happening, you may learn that it's doing bad. So sometimes it happens what you're going through life. And that's how you'll see the commentaries of Torah. If you listen carefully, a lot of them are describing what they lived through in life, what goes on in their community. The commentaries doesn't mean that this is what Torah is saying. The way they explain it is based upon the experiences they have or people around them.
So how does it fit over there in a kind of overall context to say they don't know how to do that?
Well,
what if you got circumcision?
If you want to read it, you can read it through. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going through the chapter to explain the chapter there. I mean, you can do that if you want. It's chapter 4, verse 17. You can look it up. All right. But it's just a matter of different perspectives from the same words. It's also about gathering, acquiring, and like it says, at the land in Bereshit it says, "V'aretz asasa," the land made. What does it mean? The land made? It means to produce something. So you would translate it, and the land produced. So the word doesn't mean produced. It means it made. What did it make? It produced. So the term is produced, but the direct translation you say it made, which is a problem in translation. It's not necessarily the same thing. No, it can be the same thing, but doesn't have to be the same thing. Made and produced can be two different things. Produced is when you produce something. Made, you could have made a lot of different things. Making doesn't always mean produce. Making can be destruction too. Making can be a theory. Making can be anything. So, one word it depends how you look at it. You can look at it in theory, you can look at it in reality, you can look at it in different realities. But
why did the Torah use words that are somewhat ambiguous? You can translate
why did the
this,
Torah use
why
words
did
that are ambiguous? The Torah didn't use words that are ambiguous. The Torah wasn't teaching you a language. What the Torah was doing is the Torah was describing the movement of energy in each instance. So the letters, which it's not taught in Jewish day schools generally, the letters and the flow of the letters, the shape of the letters have a flow to them. And that flow has a meaning. And it's these flows that apply in each place. So there's a flow of energy. So in each place it says there's a flow of energy. Okay? But you have to know what's happening in order to translate that word flow of energy. There's a movement. The Torah says there's a movement. There's movement everywhere. But you have to look at the specific thing to know what type of movement, how the movement is, where it's going, where it's coming from. So the Torah is, in a certain sense, ambiguous. It gives you a general idea of...
I'm just trying to think, I could have used the more precise language.
It is precise. The Hebrew is precise language. And in ancient Eretz Yisrael, in ancient Israel, they understood this. In ancient times, they didn't have a vocabulary like we have today. They were very limited. They used certain words which meant a lot of things. You have to understand that the language we have is very developed. It wasn't like that many years ago. So people would say a word and have a whole meaning, expect you to understand it. Thank you.
And you're trying to say that these words were actually did the creation, God's words that actually did you're saying these energy flows.
Well,
that actually did something.
You can say these...
Not just merely a word.
That's correct. You can say, not that these words made the creation, that the flow of these letters and words represent the flow of creative energy that creates things. Now, to say they created, you can't really say, because that's not what they did.
He said, let it be like that.
Right. So the words didn't create. The words represent the creation, the flow that's happening. And so therefore, it's different. You know, you're a person of action, okay?
Yeah.
It's a general term. But during the day, you do many different actions. Okay? So if I say you're a man of action, if I want to know the details, I have to write a description. But if I don't need to say the details, I just say man of action, and you figure out what it is if you need to. And the Torah also gives you the general picture. But the details, that's what is often not explained. That's where Kabbalistic texts come into are very helpful. And a lot of other ancient texts, because they do give certain details of the words that you don't, and Sifrei Dikduk, they give details of words that you wouldn't normally read. And if you go through Sifrei Dikduk, books on biblical grammar, not Hebrew grammar, you will see a lot of interesting variances and nuances and things in the words, how each place has a different meaning based on the total picture of that paragraph or that chapter or that verse. It's very fascinating. I mean, for some people it might be very boring, but for other people it will probably be very interesting. So, Bereshis, it means the land produced, also. That would be in Bereshis 47. Also says, Ves HaNefesh Asher Osu B'Charon, by Avraham, and the souls they made in Charan. Now, what do you mean they made souls? I mean, did they have a spinning wheel and they had the golden thread and they made souls from it? I mean,
souls had to appear out of nowhere. I mean, souls.
Maybe
They formed, didn't get created.
Maybe they were shoemakers. That's why they had souls.
The tops of the souls.
That's right.
The ears.
The souls.
Rashi says,
Well,
translated with it, but he brings a medrash with the medrash. How did the medrash differ? I mean,
Where did the Medrash get it from? Right. So when it's talking about souls, it's talking about people. It says the people they made that. So it explains that Abraham converted the men, Sarah converted the women. So it says it's talking about people that they made, that they converted people to their way of life. So that's what it means it made. They didn't make them. It means they helped them transition, they helped them change, whatever it was.
It's like they remade them.
They remade them.
They made them into new people.
They made them into new people. But it uses the word made there, asasa. Okay? So there in a certain the translation really there would mean gathered. He gathered these people together. It doesn't. That's another meaning of the word. V'asa nefesh asher asa b'charan, the nefesh, the souls that he gathered together in Haran.
Where do you see that? What's this?
What?
Where you see, from what other passage you see that also means together? What's the proof to it?
In commentaries, they explain. This is one of the.
Also means gathering too?
Yeah. In Sifrei Diktuk, it describes this. This is what it means. It could be a Sefer Aruch where I got it from. There's a lot of interesting things. Sefer Sharashim, Sefer Aruch, the different svarim that I go through. Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch connects this word with, he says it can mean making, forming, doing, pressing, observing. You observe something, you're doing something, fulfilling, limit, expanding activity, causing to grow, develop, concentrating energy, position. These are all things of asa, of doing.
So how do you know which one to use, which translation to use?
Each place, that's why you have to study the Chumash and see what fits in. Before you say this is a translation, this is the explanation, you have to sit and think about it. And so this translation makes sense here. This is the action that's happening here. And yeah,
So if there are translations on various levels,
right.
because there are different levels
Right.
of understanding, so that the word can mean a variety of things according to which level you understand.
100%. If so, every verse can actually use the different translations depending on how you understand the verse. So according to different midrashim or the Gemara or Dikduk or Kabbalah, Chassidus, each one is going to take the words and put a comma here, change the punctuation, change the way you pronounce it, have a different understanding of what's going on. This is all part of the Shivim part of the Torah. Everything can be understood in many different ways. And depending on how you see it will depend on how you translate it. Okay. Elikim, God, a power of boundaries, is the translation we commonly use here. The Purush HaTesis, the Baal HaTesis, translate this. Boundaries, it says boundaries are set up or fixed. Elikim means boundaries that are set up here or fixed. Vayas Elikim, these boundaries are set up or fixed. And in Sefer Pliya, which is a Kabbalah Sefer, it says that this refers to Bina, understanding. This Elikim. In all its details, the word S, as we mentioned, incorporates all the details without any further description. It doesn't give description. And so many times when you have S, they'll just say it includes everything else that's going on that isn't described in the verse. The filter. Harakia is the filter. It's Harakia has a numerical value of 385, which is the same as Shekhinah, divine presence. The Shekhinah is an expression of the Creator in creation, and that's what Harakia is. Harakia has a resonance of that because it allows expression of the Creator's understanding in creation. Vayavdel, and separated, or as we translate, and it distinguishes. This is about improving on the negative aspect of making, of ayas. There when you make something, there's a positive and negative, and so what this distinguishes is it separates so you can bring out the positive or be left with a negative, but it creates a distinction. The word also refers, the word vayavdel, badel, to smelted metal or solidification of certain chemicals. You would also use this word vayavdel. So within, bain is translated between, but bain can also be within. And where does it say? Where does it have that? In Tehillim 136, it says, "He makes the heaven with understanding." And the word bina, which is understanding, also contains the word bain. So comprehension happens within. Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says it also has a meaning of bain, that it penetrates something to the core, or insight, or making known, or interaction between elements. He shows different use of the letters and words. Let's see. Hamayim, the current of the surge. It causes that there should be a current of the surge which is visible. While the mayim itself, the surge itself, is not visible, the currents become visible. That's what the mayim here is, the currents that now are separated to become, that we can become aware of it. It's like now you have a tool to be able to see those currents, to measure the currents, to analyze them. Asher, this, that. Asher has a numerical value of 501, which is the same as in Shmos, where it says, "V'daiti es chukei elikim," I'll make them know. V'daiti is I'll make them know. So it's also 501. So it's about knowing. It has a relationship to the idea of knowledge and knowing. It's lower. Mitachas can also be translated as instead of. You have this instead of this. Tachas this, you put this in its place. So it can also mean instead of. And in Tehillim 38, it means, tachas means rest. And in the Gemara Talmud Tmura, 26b, it means grasp. So, it could be here that you're grasping something. It could be that there needs to be a rest. It could be applied in different ways depending on how you want to understand the verse. It's lower than the filter. The word lorakia is numerically 410, which is the same value as the words in Hebrew when you say to feel, sustain, or meet someone. These three words we find, feel, sustain, and meet, we find it says, "Ula yumasheni bin Avi," maybe my father will touch me, by the blessings where Yaakov has it. So it has yumasheni. Yumasheni is 410, and in Bereshis 41, there it says sustain or provide for. Al picha yishak kalami, where Pharaoh tells Yosef that they'll be sustained. So there, yishak is also sustain is 410, and in Shmos it says, and he met him, v'hi b'derach b'malin v'yifgeshehu, and he met him. So this is another aspect that we find, that we relate to the resonance of a word through a numerical value. There's a numerical relationship, so we connect it as having some. It's not the same meaning, but it has a relationship to it, and so when explaining and looking into it, you'll find even in Medrash a lot of strange things where these meanings come from. but they relate to in different ways. In Kabbalah, this is more explained. But so these are, the filter here is about feeling, sustaining, or meeting. It does all these things. In order to differentiate, it creates the feeling between the two. It sustains, has to sustain what comes out of it, and it's also a meeting place of the two. So it has those qualities. Then again it says a vein and within. Vein is numerically 62, Beis Yud Nun, which is the same numerical value as Vayivoldu, and they were born, in Bereshis 10. And in Shmos 26, it says V'hivdila, and it will divide. So this Bein here, on a numerical level, will relates to dividing things. It relates to something giving birth, which is all what's happening here through the filter. That it's giving birth to something and it's dividing, but it's happening within. The current of the surge, Hamayim, being the essence and source of life of what materializes later. Asher, this that is, the word means that. Asher could be that, which, who, progress or forward movement. Me'al, a cover. Me'al, it doesn't say al, it says me'al. Because it's hanging in its own space. Al means it's hanging on something. Me'al means it's above it, but it's not on top of it. So it's in its own space. It hangs in the air, Rashi says. It's from the same root as me'il. Me'il is a coat. But a coat is on the person, whereas this is me'al, it's above. So it refers to something used to cover. Me'al l'rakia, to the filter. The word kera, with an ayin, means torn. You rip something. Kriya. So kera is torn. So when a division or distinction is made, the same letters are used with the addition of the letter yud. So it's kera is to tear apart. The yud is added because it's not about tearing apart, it's about a separation to create something. Whereas kriya is more of a much bigger separation. The yud reflects the divine, reflects the creator within what is happening. As this covers the tear, when you have something difficult, bad that happens, it's not easy to live through it. It's not. But when you see the creator, when you have trust and faith that the creator knows what it's doing, and you have that faith allows you to cover over the tear, so you can go on and not be pulled into it. And the tear, or the issues in life. Sometimes, how do you deal with an issue? If you have trust that there's a God that looks after it, it allows you to go on. If you don't have it, then it's just devastating it's just devastating, that's all. So it kind of covers over the issues to some degree, belief or faith.
What do you mean? It hides something?
It doesn't hide it. I guess in some degree it when you cover something, you're hiding it. But I'm not sure if the covering is hiding it, or the idea of covering is putting it aside to some degree. When you cover something, it's not always you're hiding it, but sometimes you're just putting it away so it doesn't stare you in the face. Because if it stares you in the face, you can't do anything. But by covering it, it doesn't. It puts it on the side. So yeah, you can say it's covering and hiding, which is what it's doing to some degree. But its purpose isn't hiding. The purpose is just to allow you to move forward. And Vayihi Chen, and it becomes, or so it became, what is. Chen is what is. Now, Rashi, in Tehillim, also says the word Cain means then, or truth. In Proverbs 11, the word Cain is translated as truth, or in Bamidbar, Numbers 27, just. So it can be translated sincere, proper, truthful. The Aruch HaShalom writes that chen also means bent or bound. So these are just a few meanings of the translation of how we translate it. We based it on a variety of different books. Now, there are different meanings and different ways of putting this verse together, like all the other verses. If you translate it this way, then you have to change the way the verse is. It's a different flow. So what I did is I did two other examples of how, using the different translations, the verse can be translated in different ways. So these are two examples. One example is, you can translate the verse in the following way. And it is improved through discernment, all aspects of expansion, and each level in the interaction of the continual flow, making known easy to grasp aspects of the expansion, and in the interaction of the continual flow, making known that which is distant to grasp of the expansion, that which needs to become clear. So that's another way of translating it. Once you understand the different meanings of the word, you can then come to translating it in this way. Translation is interpretation. It's a beautiful flow. You don't find it in translations, but it's a beautiful flow of the words. Another way of translating is...
But don't you change the meaning? You do change the meaning of the sentence.
Absolutely. It's a perspective of how you get it to flow in English and in your mind. It's not just words.
So
This action...
What you just said now, what does that mean exactly, the whole phrase?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
What it means is that there's improvement, and the improvement is because we're able to discern. There's a discernment of all the aspects of the expansion and what that's happening in creation. Now there's an awareness of what's going on. So when there's an awareness, you have more comprehension, more understanding, you relate to it better. It's not just a blind thing. And so some things are easier to grasp as it expands, some things are more distant. And Vayichai means it becomes clear. There's more clarity now that you see what's happening.
What was the original translation? I don't have it.
Okay, there's a page over here. Okay, you can get the page. You'll see.
But it probably is a drastic change from...
Of course, if you take it and say God made a firmament and it's separated between the water which is under the firmament, the water which is above the firmament, and it was so, and then you go to this translation, it's two different worlds. The first one, you don't know what God made, you don't know what the firmament is, you don't know what the water is, you don't know what anything what it's talking about. When you're talking about being able to discern things and there's more expansion, more development, that's something that a person relates to. So that translation makes a lot of sense, because it's not just something that happened who knows when in time, it's something that happens every day. So if you want to translate it, if the Torah is a guide of what's happening every day, then you're going to translate it this way, not in Old English. Another way of translating the verse is gathering to fix, order, coming forth with the expansion. So you gather yourself together there's expansion, things happening, so you have to gather things together in order to fix, to put it in its place. And individualization in the core of the perpetual flow expresses lower vibration from the expansion. The core of the perpetual flow expressed beyond any expansion, and it is established. That's a little bit more difficult, but it also has, if you sit down with the verse and with the words, it gives a whole different understanding and meaning to the verse. So these are just two examples of how the verse can be translated in a different way again. Any questions?
Does Chayil also mean favorable?
That's with a ches.
Chayil means...
No, we say with a ches, the pronunciation is the same, But if it depends which letter you use, a ches or a chaf.
Cain, you said Cain.
Yeah, we use the cane here. Sugar
this,
cane.
This is pronounced cane?
Yes. Well, no, it doesn't have a dot, so we say chen, but it's a chaf, not a ches. There's a difference in a chaf and a ches, but at God rules we don't pronounce it, make the difference in it.
But it has to have a dot in it to say Cain.
Right, it needs a dot in it.
Does this have a dot? Yeah.
No, it doesn't have a dot. So it's chen. Okay. Now we'll do a little bit more understanding the words here. Vayas. And the first letter of the verse is vav. Vav means and. What does a vav do? A vav has a yud at the top, a dot, and it has a line that comes down. So it reflects something that's being drawn down. So this vav, which is translated as and, it actually continues the flow of creation, which is actually, from our perspective, everything is happening simultaneously in the thought of the Creator. Each letter vav is translated as and, but it shows a movement that comes downward, so to speak, from one level to another. It's something that already existed before in some way, and now it's being brought forth and strengthened. So the vav is something that joins two things, place A to place B, but it also reflects that there's something that's coming from place A to place B. The vav and it is the distinction between the primal spiritual forces. It is set up, taking it from thought into action and applying it in the mind to see that it works. So it's put into its position in the movement of creation. Interestingly, the last two letters of the word vayas is ayin and shin. And if you pronounce those two letters as osh, osh means a nest. In the book, osh is a nest.
Net?
A nest. A bird's nest.
A nest.
A nest, yeah. Now, the place where you have that word is in Eov, in Job chapter 27. He built like a nest his house. Bono cha'osh beisai. So there we have the word, there it's used as nest. So it's making. A bird makes a nest, right? But it doesn't mean making, it means the nest. The end result. That's another meaning of the word. Vayas, if you want. Power of boundaries. This is through the understanding of Elikim, which is not the aspect of din. Many times the word name of Elikim is a name of judgment or law and order, but here it's not that at all. It's about understanding. There's no aspect of that type of judgment here, of severity. There's judgment of what has to be done, but it's through understanding. In all its details, as we've said, S encompasses all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and therefore it denotes all details of what's happening, distinguishes. It separates and joins them at the same time. But from this, distinguishing becomes eventual separation. It's very interesting. Many times we make distinctions, we do things as educators, as parents, as teachers, whatever it is, and we often don't see how in 20, 30, 40 years the end result creates a different way of life. How the children or the people that learn take that, they understand it at the time we say it, but it becomes applied differently a generation or two later. That's because every generation has its way that it applies things. Now, another way to read this verse is that the rakia that separates is the name Elikim. Vayas Elikim es harakia. And Elikim is the Rakia. So in other words, what is separating here when it says Vayavdel and it separates, it's talking about Elokim separating, not the Rakia. The name of Elokim creates limitations, definitions, and so in that respect, Elokim is the Rakia. Elokim is that which makes the definition and distinction in order there should be a separation later on. So normally you would say, and Elokim made the Rakia is making that distinction, but you can translate it as Elokim is the Rakia, and so Elokim is making a separation. It's just a...
You're saying Raki is Elokim.
Right.
So why didn't they use Raki instead of Elokim?
Because the reason it uses the word Rakia
What's
is
the extra?
in order to describe what is happening. That Elokim is now being used as a filter in order to separate the Mayim from above and below.
But he used the word Rakia for that purpose, as a filter.
No, Rakia explains what Elokim is doing. It's Elokim creating the distinction, and Rakia explains the action that Elokim is doing. That's all. It's just a matter of how you read the words. You read it one way, you translate one way. You can read it another way, just a slight variance in punctuation or a slight difference. When it says Vayavdel and it separates or it is distinguished, who and what is distinguishing it. So normally you would say the Rakia, but you can say it's Elokim also. That's all. It's just, but the Torah doesn't tell you which word it applies to, so you can apply it either way. It's not usually applied that way, but that doesn't mean it cannot apply that way. If you stop to think, rather than just repeat the way you're taught, you stand back and look at it, and you can apply it in a different way. It flows differently, and it doesn't change anything in the Torah. It's just how you view the flow of the letters and words. And distinguishes within a divine presence for this current state of being. At this point, space has not been actualized, and so the only thing to actually hear is the divine presence. Within the current, it remains part of the surge, part of the flow. The current remains part. It's not separated from it until later on in creation, where it finds its own expression, its own place. Lower, beneath, means it's not beneath it, it's in the same space, but it's a slow. It's like a few things in the same space. One is flowing fast and one is flowing slow, but they're occupying still the same space, basically. And it could be that it's below because it's a heavier element, and being a heavier element, it's a slower movement. So for us, they may both be the same because they're both super fast. But between themselves, one is a bit slow, one is a bit heavier. And that's okay. Within the divine presence of the current, it covers. It covers also means it's lighter than. It's a distant, elevated cover. It's not a cover that's on it, but it's distant. It's floating above it. Al is a close relationship, and Me'al is distant. This is possibly where the place of Eden, called Eden, exists. When we talk about this place here, above the Rakia, it's talking about Garden Eden Elyon, the higher Garden Eden. The place below the Rakia is talking about the lower Garden of Eden. There's two Garden of Edens, which is another discussion we'll have at some point of what Garden of Eden is. What Eden is, what Garden of Eden, because it says the water came from Eden to water the garden, so it's two separate places. So where is the garden? That's a whole interesting discussion of its own. But in general, there's description here that above is referring to the Garden of Eden, the higher garden and the lower garden.
What's the difference between me'al and al?
Al is something where it's touching, it's close, and me'al means it's more distant. It's above, but it's more distant, not touching. Vayihi Chayin, it becomes what is, it becomes the power of returning to the Creator. The letter in Vayihi, Vav Yud, Vei, Vai, you call it Vai, Woe, Vei, in the word indicates a lack of joy or separation from the Creator. What is forever clear and revealed, the understanding of how the creation is implemented. Through pain, the concealment is broken, and we can return to a depth of that which is concealed. The word Chayin can be used as an acronym for Kelim Nishbarim. Chaf, Nun. Chaf is Kelim, vessels, Nishbarim, broken. So in Kabbalistic terminology, you'll find often broken vessels. A person with a broken heart, broken body is a broken vessel. And so to spiritually, you have the idea of broken lights, broken vessels, receptacles that are broken. And Chayin can refer to broken vessels. Because they're separated from the Creator, it also causes them to be broken. So if you want to know why we have pain in life and why we go through this, is because we feel separation from the Creator. The Creator may be here all the time, but we don't see it, we don't feel it that often, and so we feel broken inside, or we feel a vacuum inside. It's not unusual. A person can have everything they want and still feel empty inside. A person can have all the love and still feel broken inside. There's a lot that goes on within. And so the Vayihi Chayin means that with this creation, with this separation, there is pain involved. Because there is separation of some sort, on some level, no matter what we do. Okay. Any questions? Okay, for tonight I think we'll stop here. And next week we'll continue. We'll continue with this, finish this sentence and a few more. And if anyone has a topic they want me to speak on something specific, I was thinking of maybe at some point just doing a few weeks on topics. So I may do a topic of the story of Avraham and give you a whole new translation, because the reason I'm doing that, because the way we're going till we get to things can take I don't know how many years. So maybe one week we'll do a little bit on the Garden of Eden and what happened with Adam and Eve, another week with another few weeks with Avraham. So I'll go into topics.
You were saying you meant to the Akedah.
The Akedah, right.
So when are you going to finish your first book?
The first book?
So I want to go to Actus and buy it.
I don't know yet.
What?
I don't know.